Konnichiwa and good evening. My name is Dr. Alex Rosen. I am a pediatrician in Berlin, Germany, and the co-president of Ippnw Germany, the German affiliate of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to address you today, 9 years after the beginning of the nuclear catastrophe of Fukushima. As we look back on the last 9 years, it is clear that the nuclear catastrophe has not in fact ended, but that it is ongoing, and that it is severely affecting the people living in the irradiated areas. The Japanese government and the nuclear industry have repeatedly tried to downplay the medical effects of the nuclear fallout, the health impact on the population, and have tried to erase the memory of the nuclear catastrophe from public record. One of the ways that they are doing this is by using the Summer Olympics, which are due to take place this summer in 2020, to simulate a normality in the affected regions that simply is not there. While the Summer Olympics are supposed to take place in Tokyo, in fact the first games of the season will take place in Fukushima City, just 50 kilometers away from the crippled nuclear reactors in Fukushima Daiichi. And obviously this is a symbolic act meant to symbolize the normality that the Japanese government wants the world to see. But when you look at the situation, you clearly see that it is not anywhere near normal. There are still tens of thousands of people in Fukushima who cannot return to their homes, who have lost everything, not just due to the earthquake and the tsunami, but due to the nuclear catastrophe that has caused radioactive fallout over large parts of the prefecture. Now, the Japanese government is trying to get people to move back into these areas by declaring them safe and inhabitable. But when you look at the actual radiation that exists in these places, it is way above international standards. The Japanese government is willing to break international safety standards in order to promote people to move back to villages and towns that they once inhabited. Another contentious issue is the Olympic torch relay, which is due to take place in the end of March, straight through the death zone around the nuclear power plant of Fukushima Daiichi. This is another aspect that we as doctors simply cannot leave uncommented, because Greenpeace in October of 2019 measured hotspots that showed radioactive rays more than 40 times the Japanese national average in J Village, where the torch relay will start. A situation that places the athletes and the visitors in harm's way. When we asked the International Olympic Committee for comments, we were answered by Dr. Richard Budgett, the medical scientific director of the International Olympic Committee, who said that it is their understanding that the air dose rates in venues where competitions are due to take place in Japan are comparable to the air dose rates in other major cities worldwide. While this is undoubtedly true, he does not answer our question regarding radioactive hotspots, regarding the chance of radioactivity spreading from the mountainous and forest regions of Fukushima Prefecture to the villages, towns, cities, and sport venues in the country by forest fires, flooding, storms, or simple pollination. All of these issues are not addressed by the International Olympic Committee, and also not by the Japanese government. Instead, they are simulating a normality that does not exist for the people living in the affected regions. Another aspect in which the nuclear industry and the government are trying to downplay the health effects of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant meltdowns is the thyroid study by the Fukushima Medical University. Just in February, new statistics were published, and we now know that an official number of 197 children have contracted thyroid cancer in Fukushima Prefecture in the last 9 years alone. Now, this number might seem small, but when you compare it to the number of thyroid cancer cases in this age group that would have been expected, which is 12, you see that they are increased by a factor of 17 compared to the Japanese average. Now, a lot of times the increase in thyroid cancer in the population in Fukushima is being blamed on a so-called screening effect. The researchers are arguing that if you looked closely into a population, you will always find a number of cases of cancer that would not have been clinically apparent. But this cannot be true for the thyroid cancer cases found in the past years, because after the initial screening of nearly 300,000 children in Fukushima Prefecture, all of them had thyroid screenings, and we knew if they had cancer or not. Every cancer that developed later must have developed later and not been there in a latent form beforehand. So we can say that all of the 96 cancer cases that have been diagnosed since 2014, after the initial screening was completed, all of these 96 thyroid cancers in children and adolescents must have developed after the initial screening of 2014. And if you compare that to the number of cases expected during those years, from 2014 to 2020, you see, which would be 4, you see that the number of cancer cases is even increased by a factor of 23. 96 is 23 times higher than 4. So we can safely say that the increase in thyroid cancer rates that we see in children and adolescents in Fukushima are unprecedented worldwide, except for one region, which is the affected region around Chernobyl, in Belarus and in Ukraine and in parts of Russia, where children after the nuclear catastrophe also developed very high rates of thyroid cancer. Another issue worrying us right now are the plans to dump radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. As you know, the nuclear catastrophe caused 4 reactors to malfunction. All of these reactors still contain high amounts of fuel rods, high amounts of radioactive fuel, and that means that they have to be cooled externally with water continuously. For the past 9 years, every day, tons and tons of cooling water have had to be injected into these reactors in order to prevent another nuclear catastrophe. And all of this water cannot be collected afterwards, some of which goes into the groundwater, some of which goes into the ocean, but the one part of the water that can be collected is stored on site at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. And the Japanese government is arguing, and TEPCO is arguing, that the space is running out to collect all of this water. And they said the best solution would be to dump it into the Pacific Ocean. Now, obviously, a lot of people protested, and a lot of people had doubts that radioactive water would actually be a good thing to dump into the Pacific. So TEPCO argued that they had released or had removed radioactive particles from the water up to a level where it was safe to dump. But studies showed that there were still high levels of radioactive isotopes, not just tritium, but also strontium and other very dangerous elements that can cause cancer and other radiation-bound diseases. So the threat of the Japanese government to dump radioactive water in a large scale into the Pacific Ocean after the Olympic Games is one we have to take very seriously, because dilution was never a solution to pollution. It means that if you spread the radioactivity over a large amount of water, and thereby a large amount of people who would be affected by this radioactivity, taken up by water organisms, by algae, by fish, and ultimately by the ultimate predator, humankind, you just spread the threat, but you don't reduce the number of cancer cases. You just make them more difficult to see, because the radioactivity does not just affect a small oceanside village, but it affects most of the coastal areas around Fukushima and towards the north. For all of these reasons, we as health professionals and doctors are concerned about the repeated attempts of the nuclear industry and the Japanese government to downplay the health effects of the Fukushima nuclear catastrophe. We remind you that the Japanese people have the same inalienable rights as every other people on the planet. The right to live healthy lives in a healthy environment, and the right to be informed about health dangers. These rights are being infringed upon by the Japanese government, and this is of great concern to us. I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address these few points, and I would like to guide you to our website, which is called www.radioactive-olympics.org, organization or a campaign that is trying to address the situation of the people living in the irradiated and affected areas in light of the upcoming Olympic Games. Thank you very much. Arigato gozaimasu. Arigato gozaimashita.